So we just want to introduce our educators. We've got a whole host of different educators with us today. One of them being Pelego Powell, who is an assistant head teacher within a thriving inner city primary school in Birmingham. And he's been teaching for the past 11 years. He's a huge advocate for education, always seeking new ways to just maximize young people's educational opportunities. He's also currently a creative and artistic director for the Aston Performing Arts Academy. He's been doing that for the last 12 years. And over the years, he has worked with over 15,000 young people, which is quite impressive, and just hasn't any signs to stop this anytime soon. Then we have Charlotte Brandy, who also is one of the Black educators here today. She's a director of learning for creative arts at an inner city secondary school in Birmingham. She's also a partner and a mom to two young boys, and I'm sure can relate to many people who are here this evening. Charlotte is grateful to have committed her career to education for the past 11 years, and her passion has always been in performing arts, where she recognizes the power it has to allow young people to express who they truly are. Something I do agree with Charlotte on. And then we have Danita Ford, who is an enthusiastic and highly motivated ICT secondary school teacher. She's also an assessor for adult education. So she has that background where she has education on both sides, both adult and young people. She's also a co-opted special educational needs link governor at an outstanding inner city primary school in Birmingham, and has been doing that for the last 5 years. She's also committed to safeguarding and promoting education in all its forms. Next slide, pal. Thank you. And in the coming weeks, we also have a next few of our educators, which is Imani Clow. She describes herself as a character educator, facilitator, and coach. Her years of experience has enabled her to work with decision makers in many different organizations towards how they engage with youth. And in July 2016, she took a step into creating her organization and founded the Imani Academy, a social enterprise focused on empowering the next generation to go confidently in the direction of their dreams. Imani has an undergraduate degree in youth justice and a master's in character education. We then have Ziggy Moore, who is also an English teacher and a behavior management specialist and an education inclusion consultant. Ziggy is the founder of More Education, which was established over 5 years ago to support children in need of extra support with GCSEs. He's dedicated to working with schools, troubled youth, providing support in raising standards of all students. Ziggy encourages young people to become independent learners so they can focus on enhancing their educational well-being. And then finally, we have Safiya Douglas. She's last but not least, and she's head of early years foundation stage and key stage 1 in a Birmingham inner city school. Safiya has dedicated her career to education over the past 12 years, and she's passionate about encouraging education through inquisitive play. She has a BA honors in education studies and sociology and early years PGCE. She believes that education is the key to a child's success. And then you have myself, which is, my name's Anika Cobbler, as I said. I'm a passionate English teacher. And in fact, my career over the last few years has really been focusing on personal development coaching. And currently I'm working as a mental health lead in an inner city independent school. I specialize in working with young people with emotional, social, and behavioral difficulties so they can achieve and make academic progress. I believe in education and promoting good mental well-being techniques that can really help our young people to just transition into young adult life independently. So one of the reasons we are here today is because we wanted to get a group of Black educators that could connect to the Black community and give support to parents, Black parents raising Black children, that they have the right support and are empowered to connect to their schools and find out what their schools are doing to support their child out of transitioning out of home and back into school. So before we go into the presentation this evening, I would really like to introduce you to the founder of the Black Heritage Support Service, who is hosting this event tonight, and that is Natalie Scarlett. And she will tell you a little bit about the Black Heritage Support Service, what they do, and why she wanted to do this project for you today. So Natalie, over to yourself.
Hi everyone, sorry, just a quick one. Thank you all for coming. So we decided to put on the session this evening because we've seen that everyone's kind of has struggled throughout the past year, myself included. I'm a single mum to one, and it's just been a really, really hard time. But actually, I think a worry for us and a concern for us was that, you know, there's already a massive gap between our children and their peers and other groups in school. We don't want our kids going back to school and then teachers kind of just throwing them back in the curriculum without any kind of recovery plan. So this really was about finding Black educators who could give you some insight as to how things work on the ground in schools. That's information that I haven't got, but now we've got a bit of access to that. So it would be really good if you could kind of, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat or just kind of raise your hand, because we really want to make sure this is a productive session. And whilst the educators will do some presentations, we do want this to be interactive and for you to ask any questions that you have, or if you've got some insight and you're from an educational background, I'm not, you can actually pitch in and just say, this is how it works in this part, in our part of the country or in our school. But yeah, hopefully this is a really insightful and informative session. So thank you all for being here. I hand it back over to you, Anika or Pelego.
Okay, so what we're about to go into now is a presentation by Pelego Powell, Charlotte Brandy, and Danita Ford. Before we go in, do you want to just say hi, guys, before you start?
Yeah, hi guys. I'll introduce myself in a moment once the presentation starts. On Pelego Powell.
Hi everyone, I'm Charlotte Brandy.
Hi everyone, I'm Danita Ford.
Pelego, over to you.
Oh, brilliant, Anika, thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody. As I said, I'm Pelego Powell. I'm an assistant head teacher in a primary school and also a creative artistic director. And I want to introduce, I want to give a little bit about me, because I really want to lay the foundation of my passion for young people, my passion for young Black people, and my passion for education. And throughout this presentation, you'll quite often hear me speak about young Black people and be unapologetic with it, because for so long now, we have underachieved, and we have been the outcome of exclusions, or the product of exclusions. So we really need to change the narrative. So a little bit about me to start off with. I'm one of 7. My mother was a single parent. We grew up, well, I was born, and we all grew up in the inner city area, where it was filled with drugs and violence and gangs, etc., poverty, deprivation. And throughout schooling, I found it a challenge. Probably excluded about 12 times, didn't really connect with any teachers, struggled educationally. So it was quite difficult going through my school years. One thing I did have, however, is my twin brother, who was amazing, and we kind of sought solace in each other and equally in the arts. And it wasn't really until year 9 or 10 where we started to channel the negativity within the arts, and that really changed my life and make me kind of get more into my education, see education as a priority. Somehow, years later, I managed to graduate from university become a teacher, and then eventually a senior leader in a primary school, but staying very true to my core of working in inner city schools. So I've worked in Handsworth, Lascelles, and now in Highgate, and I'm very passionate about only working in inner city schools to support the Black children who I see on a daily basis. Staying true to my roots and staying true to the arts, I'm also a creative and artistic director in a thriving performing arts academy where we empower young people through creative arts from the ages of around 6 to about 24. And yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I hope it just kind of lays the foundation a little bit about my passion for young people and why we're here today and how we can really support the transitions of our young people. Over to you, Charlotte.
Good evening, everyone. Following from Pal, we've quite got similar backgrounds, really, in terms of our upbringing and areas where we've actually been brought up in and our interests. So there's 14-year-old me. I went to an inner city school in Birmingham, and I did okay. I did okay at school, and the reason why I say okay is because I just kind of got on and did what I needed to do. But later on in the presentation, I do hope to come back to the statement that I make in terms of I did okay. So throughout my education years, when I was in secondary school, my passion was always performing arts. It was always performing. I've always directed talent shows in school. I've always been part of the dance clubs. I even did extracurricular dance clubs, and was always involved in any performances outside of school. I then went on to doing a HND after doing my A levels, because I didn't want to go straight into university, so I was trying to find my way a little bit. So I eventually graduated at university, and I did drama and performance studies, and then that's when I found my route into wanting to do teaching. I'm now, so if we think 20 years on, I'm now into my 11th year of teaching, and I am a director of learning for creative arts. I work in an inner city school, inner city secondary school, and similar to Pal, actually, I have always found myself within inner city schools. That's where I feel that I'm able to give back to my community. I can relate to parents and the students, and for me, that's where my passion will always lie, and it's always giving back and recognizing these students' values and their beliefs. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. And I'm a huge advocate of Charlotte. I remember us, just on the side, we actually graduated the same year, and every step of the way during our educational kind of journey and professionals, we've always reached out to each other, and it's been wonderful to share this journey with Charlotte. So I'm thrilled that she's doing this session with me today. So how can you support your child's transition back into school? And really, that's what we're going to be looking at today. It's around what you can do as parents, as guardians, as uncles, as aunties, to really, really support your child. And I guess what we're going to do is break the session into 3 parts. So first of all, we're going to look at the kind of challenges that our young Black children will face when they go back to school. What are those difficulties? We need to really understand the signs so that once they're presented, we can identify them straight away. I guess the next part is really focusing on why our Black children are more at risk, and really looking at data and statistics to back up what we're saying. And then thirdly, and crucially, we're going to look at using those stats and data, using all the information around the challenges about what we can do to support the child, what you can do as parents, and equally what the school can do to support your child. So the first thing I want to do is get you guys working. So I want you to think about what you think will happen to your child next week when they return back to school on the 8th of March. Just have a think, you know, what do you think will happen? I've got a Jamboard which looks a little bit like this. It's just coming up now, as you should see in a moment. And along the side, you will see post-its. So you just select the sticky note and put in if you think they're fall behind, if you think they struggle socially, you think they're probably excluded, anything at all that you think that might happen to your child, I want you to jot it on the Jamboard. What I'm going to do is select the URL address and put that straight into the chat. So if you in the chat, let me just make sure it's on everyone. Give me a minute. If you in the chat now, select this URL address, and then it's there, and then start to pop things down, if you can. So some of you so far, thank you. I've already commented, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. So some of you are saying that teachers will say my child is behind. Yes, absolutely. Some of you are saying that they may be overwhelmed with getting back into routine. Completely agree with that one. Children will be overwhelmed. It's new, it's been months. My child will be unable to keep up with the schoolwork presented. Overwhelmed with the work, trying to catch up. So I'm seeing a pattern here, may not be able to concentrate, struggle with the routines. Brilliant, new routines again, fantastic. All of these ideas are wonderful. My child may feel unmotivated. A lot of children are going to feel unmotivated after spending months in lockdown, anxious. So really a lot about mental health, a lot about being social, not being able to get back into routines. That's wonderful. Maybe feeling unsupported, fantastic. I'm going to go back to the presentation. Can you all see the presentation? Yeah, right. And basically everything that you've said is absolutely true. There will be an academic decline. Make no mistake about it. Our children, the majority of our children will fall behind. They haven't had any teaching for five half terms. We're looking at 2.5 terms, really, and 5 half terms. They haven't had any teaching, so there will be a decline. They will fall behind. That's inevitable. Behaviours might result into detentions and reports, so you might see a slight increase. I know of schools within lockdown that have given out detentions, that have given out reports, put children on reports, and this is during lockdown. So if this is during lockdown, could you imagine when they go back to school, what behaviour might look like and the consequences and sanctions for that? We're also looking at the sociological decline. Now, this is more for lower down, for more your primary school children, that will forget those key sociological kind of routines of saying please and thank you, opening doors, queuing up. All of those things are things that you just learn innately, but they haven't been in school to do that. So there will be a decline there. You mentioned it on the Jamboard. There will be a struggle mentally and emotionally, and not necessarily just for children, but for parents as well, and for teachers. And there will be a behavioural decline. Now, it's easy to think it's going to be negative, but actually, when we look at behavioural declines, it's a change of behaviour. So our children could be sometimes loud, but they then become introverted and quiet, or vice versa. They could go from being quite popular to quite into themselves with no friends and hanging around with nobody. So it's about relationships, and teachers, educators and parents identifying those little changes, because when we identify them, we can then go on to discuss them, and then we can go to make changes. And finally, and really most importantly, are exclusions. And the reason why I highlight exclusions, because it's a fact, and it's factual that our children are more likely to be excluded from schools. And I dread to think what it might look like after lockdown. So I want to quickly look at the stage 2 of the journey and look at what the data tells us, because if we truly understand the data, then we can use this to really, really, really hold our schools to account. So the data tells us that Black boys are 3 times more likely to be permanently excluded from schools. And I'm going to say that again, 3 times more likely. And that's a really, really stark fact. I'm going to give you a little anecdote. I remember my first year of teaching, I was an NQT, kind of, you're thrown into the pond of this teaching world. And I remember walking past the head teacher's office and seeing one of my boys, one of my brethrens, one of my friends, and his partner. And I asked him, I said, "What's going on? How come you're here?" And he says, "I'm waiting to speak to the head teacher about my son." And for namesake, I'm not going to say what his name is, but I'm going to say that as a kind of a dud name. His name was Zion. And I says, "Oh, so what's going on with Zion?" And he was like, "Oh, he's been in trouble, and the head teacher's called us in to speak to us." And I says, "Oh, yeah, that's fine. Dial me later and tell me what's going on. Tell me what's happened." After school, 5 o'clock came, no phone call. 6 o'clock, no phone call. 7 o'clock, no phone call. I began to think, what's going on? So then I picked up the phone and called him myself. And I was like, "Oh, what's happening?" And he turned around and said to me that my child's been permanently excluded. And I said, "You what?" And he said, "My child has been permanently excluded." Now, the reason why my phone dropped in that instance was because guess how old the child was? Guess what year he was in? He wasn't in year 6. He wasn't in year 5, 4. He wasn't even in the juniors. He was in reception. He was 4 years old. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing, that this young boy's life, his potential, everything has been snatched and stolen away from him. And it was at that time when I realized, actually, I want to stay working in the cities. And up till now, I always say this story because I kick myself that I didn't do enough to save him, because it's really hard to get somebody back from failing schooling than it is to actually prevent it from getting there in the first place. So when we start to really take a look at the data, we then realize that Black people, or Black boys, are 37 times more likely to be excluded than girls of Indian origin. If you just take a moment to read that. If you were Black, and on school-free meals, you're 168 more times more likely to be permanently excluded than a white girl without special needs from a middle-class family. 168 more times. I think that's just really scary. And it's not necessarily just about exclusions, it's also about underachievement. Our children are failing in school. Make no mistake, they are failing, which is a huge shame, and we need to do something about it. We need to do something about it. The gap for underachievement is widening year on year. It's not getting any smaller. It's not getting any better. And only 15% of Black boys after their schooling go on to university. That is an alarming fact, because if we're looking at that, then you begin to wonder, what's happening to the 85%? What are they doing? So then I started to unpick it a little bit more, and I wanted to look at what the other areas of society, how they viewed Black people, how they treated Black people. So I looked at the criminal justice system, and I realized that actually Black boys and men are 8 times more likely to be stopped and searched by the police. Black men make up the highest percentage in the prison population. In young prisons, it's almost 50%. BAME are 6 times more likely to be in prison than their white counterparts, and 240% more likely to be imprisoned for drug-related offences. Could you see where I'm going with this? So then I thought, right, let me look at the other major institution, which is health. So I thought maybe there's a difference there in health. And then I realised, or found rather, Black men are 4 times more likely to be detained under the Mental Health Act, are far more likely than other demographics to be diagnosed with severe mental health issues. I'm just going to move that. I think it says around more likely, 4 times more likely to die from COVID. And I start to see a pattern that all major British institutions are systemically racist towards our Black boys. And that is stark. And this is not me just saying it. And I know someone said to me the other day, isn't this going to scare some of our parents? And I'm really sorry if I have offended anyone. I apologize. But what I don't want to stray away from is this is factual, it's real, it's persistent, and it's something that we need to do in order to change the narrative. Systemic racism is built within the fabric of this country. So all of this, and going back to the educational setting, is around, and what I've witnessed and I've seen personally, is around the notion of unconscious biases. How one child could get a harsher punishment, and it's reflected throughout society, throughout the education, health, and judiciary system. How one child can get a harsher punishment to another. I've seen with my own eyes how one Black child has been permanently excluded in year 6 and being labelled as aggressive and violent and can't stay in the school. And another child who is white, all sorts of excuses. He's bit, he's pulled out people's hair, he's pulled teachers' hair, we've had to pin him down, but he's known as, he's had a hard upbringing, we just feel sorry for him. And all this is unconscious bias. And I've listed just a few that I want you to have a look at of unconscious biases. And we've probably all been there. And just show of hand, you could use your hands in the chat, but how many of you has seen this in your place of work or in your educational journey, when one race is passionate, but you're aggressive, or one race is really confident? And this is one for me. I'm quite a confident person, but at work, I'm boastful, I'm too much, I need to slow down, and there's so many of these unconscious biases that really, really rub me up the wrong way. I could be helpful, but for other people, for a Black race, you're threatening. This is one that really gets me. You could be assertive and quite direct, but suddenly you've got an attitude problem. Wind your neck in. If I hear that phrase one more time, and we get this all the time as Black people, and it really, really gripes me up the wrong way. And I'm so happy I've seen, not happy, that happy is the wrong word, but the fact that some of you are engaging and saying, actually, you've experienced this. I would love to hear those experiences from any one of you. I would love to hear those unconscious biases experiences that you've probably experienced.
So at this point, if you want to unmute yourself and say anything, please go ahead, anybody who's participating. But please raise your hand and use the reactions in the on your scroll bar at the bottom.
We have had a few people make comments, Anika, in the chat, and if you want to work through those or raise hands.
Yeah, so I noticed that, let me go back to somebody says, I think also young Black boys in the care system are also underrepresented. And
Rain Salmon.
Yeah, that was me, because I'm a team manager, so I manage the children in care team in Sandwell. And what I have noticed that a lot of the young Black boys that come into care, either if they've been remanded in a YRY because of some sort of offence, or because they're in care for whatever reason, they do get underrepresented. It's not just the Black boys, but Black girls anyway. Black children get underrepresented. And I think, whilst I'm hearing everybody, I think we've got to remember those our Black children in care or come to care because they've had some advanced childhood trauma, which is not their fault, but they still get underrepresented. And no matter how much support we have, like we looked after Children's Education Board, they're still underrepresented. And what I try and do is work with the lighting to sort of like say, yeah, I say about one Black child, I would say, perhaps makes it to university. And I do think the Black children in the care system, we're not acknowledged enough, and it needs to be. We need to acknowledge our Black children, because they're not living with the parents. Ourselves as professionals, we still have a duty, you know. So that's where I'm just coming from, really.
I completely agree, Lorraine. And I think we need to do is, of course, as guardians, we look after our children, we look after our cubs first, and rightly so. But we also need to adapt to the understanding of being a village and really working together. My sons, they go to quite an affluent school in Sutton Coldfield, and I think they were like one of only a few Black children in their year group. And the very first thing I did is made sure that I've got all of the Black children's parents' numbers. And I wouldn't do anything. If I'm talking up for my son, I'm talking up for their children as well, because we have to adapt that approach. And it's exactly the same for those children in care. So I completely and utterly agree with what you're saying there. Is there anyone else?
So, Lorraine, I just want to say thank you for your feedback there. We did have some people agreeing with you, Pelego, where you talked about the unconscious biases. Some people said that they experienced it in the workplace, and that sometimes they feel that they're just experiencing constant microaggressions from other cultures and so forth. And I think for me, listening to all of this, you know, it's about how can you support the black community. So somebody also agreed with you, Pelego, where you said let's raise each other's children like a village. Yes, let's focus on our own, but let's work together. And I think if we can start looking at other people's children as well as our own, and not get offended as well when you're correcting somebody else's child, I think that would be really helpful to kind of help our young people get to a different way in life going forward.
Sorry, Natalie, I do ramble on. First experience.
No, that's absolutely fine. We'd rather have it in detail. Michael, we're gonna come to you next. I just wanted to ask a question here. When my son was at junior school, I really wanted to be a parent governor, and you know, every time I kind of looked at the you know, their pictures on the wall, it was never diverse. It was almost always white, and I just wanted to know how much autonomy or power do parent governors have? What's their exact role, and would that help in terms of, I don't know, getting the support that we need for our children, even if it's racial equity? Even does that exist in school, racial equity, in the same way that it maybe does in the workplace?
On paper, yes. Policy, yes. You'll find a policy for everything. It's whether or not it's woven and it's in the vision of the school. It's whether or not it's part of the everyday ethos. But on paper, like a tick box, you will see it. But is it being communicated? And is it something that's expected from all? So I do know that as a result of what's taken place, a lot of my colleagues have delivered training on unconscious bias. I do believe that the book, Why I'm No Longer Talking About Race, should be on the curriculum for any senior leader. It's important that all of them read that book, to be honest with you. But I am a school governor, and you can become a school governor. There's a lady actually in your area. Her name is Sharon Warmington, and you know her. And her work has lifted as a result of what's taken place, and more schools are now trying to get Black governors on board. As a parent governor, you're on the board, you go through, let's say, you won't ever be on the finance, but you'll go through and have an opportunity to discuss what's being delivered in terms of the curriculum, looking at all aspects of the school, and you can have your say. Yeah, so you can sit there, you can listen, you can see from inside the things that you wouldn't see just from collecting your child from the gate. So it's really important to do that. Obviously, me being on on the other side in terms of the delivery and the accountability, I am now working on being a governor or even a trustee to be on the other side to support schools with that.
I think
So
the key thing that you said, Rachel, sorry, Natalie, the key thing that you said was accountability. And by being a governor, you are, I mean, you are one of 6, 7, 8 in a team, but you are then in a position where you can project your ideas and hold the school to account. Now, I'm a parent governor for my child's school, and albeit I sit round a round table, me one of 8, I will still push my views. I will still ask the necessary questions. In some cases, they're overturned, but at least I'm at the table. You know, Rome, and we've got to adopt that understanding that Rome wasn't built in a day. And just going back to what you said, Anika, about some people experiencing these unconscious biases, we've got the emotional intelligence as adults to know what those are. Imagine what it's like for our children who have no idea. They're sitting in a class and they're told daily, and these unconscious biases are shown to them daily. And that scares me because they can't fight for themselves. So it kind of leaves it to us as a village to do that.
So to answer that point, and I will come to you, Michael, Clark, and Naisha, I think it's Montague. But to respond to that, Pelego, I've been thinking about that recently, and I really do. I agree with what Rachel said. You know, we can't make our children feel like they should be mistreated. If anything, what we need to be working on is how do we make our children become more resilient, so that when they transition into that wider world, they don't get broken down by the system, but if anything, it encourages them to be motivated to move forward and to kind of get to those senior positions where impact can be changed. And just listening, and, you know, just to summarize some of those points that Rachel said, I would encourage, if you are a parent here today, you know, get involved in your school, find out how you can become a governor. I think that's a key point to make. Also, as well, don't just let the policies in those schools just be sitting on the shelf or in somebody's on the computer, or, you know, on their website. Ask, how is that translated into the school everyday life? And I know I've been working in a school myself. I know a lot of policies that are coming in from government at the moment. They look at a whole school approach, but are they looking at a whole school approach on a cultural level? Ask you, keep your schools accountable, okay?
Anika, sorry, I'm just conscious of time, so I just want us to move on. If we take Michael's question and then we just move on to the rest of the presentation, just because we're running out of time here. So if Michael, is Michael still there?
Yeah, Michael, are you there? He's gone away from the screen. Maybe we go to Naisha. Okay, Naisha?
Sorry, I was just going to comment on Rachel's comment about, and I think somebody else is just about being a governor. I'm a parent governor, I'm also a teacher. And that thing about governance and holding the head teacher, the senior leadership team, the school account for what's going on in the schools, challenging, you know, you are, as a governor, you are made aware of issues with particular children in the school, if there are any exclusions, if there are any appeals, and all of those things. And, you know, in my capacity as a governor, I have been able to question those. I have been able to ask questions. I have been able to seek clarification and all of those things. And like Pelego said, about being at the table, knowing for yourself as a parent of what's going on, but actually being at the table and actually making sure that you're aware, because, you know, as a Black community, we don't just hold, or we shouldn't just hold that information to ourselves, and we should share it out to the village so that your awareness is educating other parents as well, but just being there to show your face, to make sure that you are impacting, drip feeding what it is that our children need as well onto the policies.
Naisha, Michael, we're going to have to go forward. We did call your name. If you put your comment in the chat, we'll acknowledge it. Pelego, if you continue, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So just going back to why we're here and managing the transition for our pupils. and we spoke about and we unpicked the reasons for displaying our children, our Black children, displaying those negative behaviours. And it isn't, and it would be foolish of us just to think that it's all down to unconscious bias. That is a significant part, and it does contribute to those negative behaviours. But there are also these other socio-economical factors that we must consider, like low literacy and language barriers. As we said, and we've already identified, the curriculum is culturally biased. So that is another factor. There is a self-fulfilling prophecy. One of the aspects is actually, and it is also kind of unconscious bias, but there are low teacher expectations. And I'm going to encourage any child who's in year 11 at the moment and going back to do GCSEs, I urge you to speak to Ziggy, who is also a facilitator. I went into a clubhouse meeting with Ziggy, and he was talking about about evidence showing that Black people in year 11, the GCSEs after lockdown, it's likely to be underachieved or underscored due to unconscious biases. So please speak to Ziggy, because he has more information about that and ways in which that you can challenge those scores, or those kind of, I'm not sure, those algorithms of how they come up with those scores. So please speak to Ziggy. I'm going to keep it moving. Right, so I know that everyone's had a lot to say, which is fantastic, and thank you so much. Again, we're going to go back to the Jamboard, and I want you to think about, on page 2 this time, the key question is, what can schools do to support your pupils' return? Have a think about your child's school, and think about what is it that you want them to do. If you had a wish list, I'm just going to pop this in the chat. If you had a wish list for the school to do something to support your child, what would it be? So I've just popped that in the group, in the chat. And if you can just pop those answers down, please. Oh, actually, that was a direct message. Let me just change that to everyone. There you go. If you can just, if you had a wish list, what would it be for your child, for your child's school? What would you want them to do? If you can't access the Jamboard, that's fine. Just pop your comments in the chat. So we've got identify the gaps. That's the first thing I would want. Absolutely right. What are those gaps that need to be filled to ensure clear plan is in place for well-being as a pro? I love that. Looking at that emotional and mental health, and making sure, not just saying it, but making sure there's a plan in place. Spend time noticing your child's needs. Thank you for who put that in. That's some wonderful. Someone in the chat said learning mentors. Couldn't agree more. How parents, information of how parents can support at home. Fantastic. And for your child to be seen as an individual. Forget the statistics. Engage with the pupils. Identify their needs. Absolutely love it. Identify emotional and social needs. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, and everything that you've said is absolutely right. And I'm sure that Charlotte will now touch upon the third part of the presentation, which is going to be about support, advice, and how we can really help with the transition of our pupils. So this is the part I would urge you to get a pen, a pencil, something to write on, really take some notes for this next part of the session. Charlotte, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Pal. We are going to, at this point now, we are going to really try our best to unpick some of those areas that you have mentioned in the Jamboard. And as Pal has said, do hope that you've got a pen and paper and you can make some notes down, or if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat as well. And then as a group, we would collectively discuss these. Now, if we're looking at us as parents or carers, guardians, approaching the school, we're going to start looking at some practical ways in how you can confidently approach your child's school so that you can get the best out of the school. Now, if you have concerns about your child, it's important that you talk up to the school and try and avoid any of those social media chats, you know, the ones that are sometimes unmanaged by the school, because sometimes you can get false information. Make sure that you're clear and directly go to the correct members of staff. Now we're going to show, I want you to listen to 2 role plays. When you listen to the first one, I just want you to try and unpick some of the behaviours that the parent is displaying. And believe it or not, these are some of the things that we do see happen in the school.
Good evening, Miss Brandy. How can I help you today?
Beck. Hi, Mr. Beck. I know you're probably busy and I didn't make an appointment, but I'm just really concerned about Johnny, right? I'm not sure that our Johnny is ready to go back to school, and you as a school, how are you going to help us? Like, you know, how do you know that he's not going to catch corona? I don't want my little Johnny coming into school and you haven't even told me what risk assessments are in place or anything.
Miss Brandy, I have got a class that I need to go and teach.
Well, I'm concerned about my son, and you haven't told me any information since lockdown in terms of what's happening, what's the plan. Listen, yeah, you guys in that school can't even clean the toilet. How are you going to keep my child clean?
Miss Brandy, thank you for your concern. I mean, what I need you to do, if you can send an email or call the school directly and we can arrange appointments and you can bring your concerns directly then.
And when's this supposed to happen? If I send an email, it's never going to reach your table.
You can also call the school and we can arrange an appointment where we can sit down and really hash out and look at what issues.
Just get back to you, classes. I don't think I'll be sending Johnny in. Bye.
Oh.
Okay. Now, believe it or not, we as teachers, we experience those type of behaviours. Now, as I said, try to avoid getting into any conversation that is going to harp on your emotional side of it. When you want to speak to your child's school, it's important because this is your precious child. So you need to make sure you take the important actions to make sure that you get the feedback you want. So don't just turn up like Johnny's dad did. Make sure that you book an appointment so you get the meaningful discussions, you get what you want. Try to avoid going with the blame culture, blaming the school. Yes, the schools are accountable for our children, but there are children as well. We've got to see this as a two-way thing. Try also, don't listen to any hearsay. Make sure that you get your evidence as parents so that you can confidently go in, and that sometimes you're going to need to challenge the school, and you are within your rights to do so. So the second role play, we want to have a look at an example of the do's, the type of things that you can be going into the school with. Good morning, Mr. Berg. Thank you for having this meeting with me.
Hello, Miss Brandy. How can I help you?
Hi, I just wanted to discuss some of Johnny's behaviours recently during lockdown and few concerns that I'm feeling a bit worried about. I've noticed that his behaviour, he's becoming a bit within himself and a bit withdrawn. Johnny was always a very proactive child, and since lockdown, I noticed in particular his numeracy levels have dropped a little bit, and he's less engagement in those areas. I have tried to work with him in those areas as best as we can, but whenever I feel that he's getting a bit anxious and a bit agitated, I've left it. And I just wondered, Mr. Bear, in terms of building up his confidence again and his self-esteem and the areas where he's like, a little behind, as a school, what do you intend to do in supporting him in moving forward?
Well, thank you, Miss Brandy, first of all, for booking an appointment and coming to see me. These issues, and we find them, are immensely important. Can you just tell me the issues exactly in numeracy, where he's struggling? Is it his mental maths or is it his space, shape and measure? Which part is it?
I would say that it's his mental maths. Before time, he was really consistent with it. And lately, and I don't know if it's because I mentioned about, him being a bit withdrawn, he's just really lost it. He's not really with it that much.
Okay, so it's quite difficult for most pupils nowadays during lockdown. The first thing I would say is log on to our software, which is Timetables Rockstars, which is all about mental maths. I'll make sure I get that emailed over to you, his login details. If you can go on there and not try and do half an hour or an hour, just keep it really small to begin with, 5-10 minutes, just to get him back, just to try and find his love for numeracy back again. Once that increases, then I can then send you over some more work, some more practical work that we can then begin working with him with. When he comes back to school, we'll do an assessment, see where he is, and then we can take it from there.
Oh, lovely, brilliant, Mr. Bear. When will I receive this information, please?
I'm in class at the moment, and I've got class throughout the whole day, but definitely this evening I'll get that over to you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for your help. Thank you. Okay. See, at that stage then, if we just try and unpick some of the areas that we spoke about, the teacher there was very much helpful. He had the time because the appointment was booked. Make sure that you try and engage and you know who the appropriate members of staff is. It's not always, you don't always have to go to the head. It might be the class teacher. If it's in secondary school, it might be someone who's in the pastoral team. Make sure and ensure, and I think Rachel mentioned this as well, know the school's policies, because if you are going with a concern, you know, most schools have their policies on the website. Have a look through it and just make sure that you are clear on what it is that you want from the school. Be clear and precise in what you wanted. Make sure that you've got clear deadlines so that they are held accountable in terms of when they get back to you. Okay, so now we're going to move on to looking at some of the academic transitions, going back into school. Now, during this time, it's important, and most of you probably have whilst we're at home, is to use the time wisely now to get to know how your child best learns, find out what their interest is. Try not to be too hard on yourself, because this will is a good setting stone for yourself to get a good picture at, actually, my child's more practical, my child is more mental arithmetic. You can then go with that background, you can then go with that narrative and take it to the school and say, look, this is what I know. Because schools, believe it or not, will act as if they know your child. But us as parents, we know what's going on and we know our needs for our children. However, you've got to collaborate and work with the school and be confident and asking them and saying, look, my child works more practical. What do you have in place to help my child out? Ask them what interventions are happening, what's going on. Ensure that you are communicating frequently with the school. Make sure that you are having a look on, you know, if it's Twitter that they use, checking it out, finding out what is being emailed to you. The worst thing is that you miss information and that you're going back to the school blinded. Pal mentioned when all children, when they go back to school, all teachers will be setting assessments. Now, these are not to put pressure on the students. These are more to help teachers to find out, okay, where are we? And I don't like that terminology that I keep hearing people use, and people within the educational setting and outside the educational setting, about lost learning. If you didn't have something in the first place, you haven't lost it, okay? You haven't lost it. So us as parents, carers, we need to not be so harsh on our children. It's not lost learning, it's for the schools and for us to find out what is the schools going to do to recover it now? What are we going to do about it? And that's one of the key things you need to take away, parents, is don't think about and saying to your child, you don't know that you're behind. And I'm guilty of it as well. It's with my 7-year-old. I will cuss him and tell him that you should know your timetables by now. But what I do need to remember is all the other skills, all the other life skills, things that he is able to do and that we can take forward and we can tailor them. There's also going to be things like amended timetables. Make sure you're aware of those. So for primary schools, and Pal will probably echo on this, they may change it, the routine slightly. So if it's numeracy or literacy for the morning, this might be changed, and they may do a bit of well-being, and they may fit it into science and looking at how the body works. And it's all about settling the child in. But again, it's about us as parents going in and asking the school, what are you doing? What are these plans? And we've bolded it there. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask your child's school what they intend to do to recover the learning for my Black child, because we've got all these stats in place, because they're saying this, or yeah, my child disadvantaged, or we're in a certain area. Ask them, what are you going to do to support my child?
Can I just chime in, Charlotte, and just say, when we're looking at these timetables, during lockdown, you've managed to use this time wisely, and you know how your child learns. Now, the timetables, if you think that actually my child can't do 6 hours a day, that's just too much. They've gone from no learning to for however many months to suddenly, boom, 6 hours a day. Too much. If you think they need to be roped in, voice it. If they only can do 1 hour or a morning or an afternoon, voice your opinion. They will be heard. They will be heard.
And I just interject there, conscious of time, I just want to say thank you to Charlotte and Pelego for just giving us some great insight there. And I just think as a reminder as well is, I think one of the things that Charlotte said was, you know, ask your school what they are doing to help recover that learning for your child. So that's a reminder. And just remember, the right communication is better. Make those appointments so you can get the right support. Okay. Back over to you, Pelego.
Okay, so we're going to move on to, so we've looked at some areas there in terms of the academic transition. If we're thinking about the mental and emotional transition, this is important as well for you to know what the school is going to be putting in place. So we, even at home, I know on the Jamboard, some of you had said that, you know, you're a bit worried about your child going back in and to being full in uniform and not in their PJs anymore. This is the time now. We've got a week before the children go back. Start trying to adapt some of those routines that you were used to before. Get them used to it, get them familiar to it, get them out for 45 minutes, make sure that they're getting their fresh air, because that's what they would have been doing at school. Schools, you need to be thinking about the behaviour policies. We talked about this, about, you know, when our children, and when sometimes when they kiss their teeth or the rolling of the eyes and they're misunderstood, schools now are putting in restorative justice approaches, okay? So they're looking at the whys, trying to look at the behaviour and patterns with children. Ask the schools if you're having issues and your child is being challenged quite a lot, ask the school about what is their behaviour policies. We talked about like looking at the reduced curriculum there as well. And if you're feeling there's a need for your child to have further support outside of the classroom, ask them what things are they doing, what other interventions are they tailoring, okay? So you need to actually think about, you know, any art sessions that are happening, any sports agencies, all those type of things there, the schools now should be putting on place. So please, parents, just be confident in that. And I just want to wrap up before I move it over to Danita. And looking at prevention is better than cure. Pal, if we just move it over. So if we have a flower, the flower is there blossoming, and we can look at that as our children. The flower needs the sun, it needs the water, it needs soil, it needs all of these nutrients to make it grow and to fulfill. And if we look at this is even the same with our children. Our children need the sunshine, okay, which can be seen as our community, the parents, okay. The water can be seen as the school, okay, and then that soil there. So we need to make sure that we are instilling all of these aspects, all of these healthy aspects into our children, and that we are coming together as a community, and that we are being consistent to allow them to grow into beautiful people that they are, okay? And I just want you all to make sure that you've got that confidence to go into the schools and you're clear to ask these questions, and don't be afraid to challenge anything that might come your way. And I hope that's been helpful. I'm just going to pass it over to Danita now. Thank you.
Sorry, Charlotte. Just to cut. I did promise that I'd come back to Michael. I just wanted him to make his comment. He's put a comment in the chat. So, Michael, would you like to speak? You're on mute.
Yes. Hello, and good evening. Thank you for the time. Now, as you're well aware, my name is Michael. Michael Clark, and I'm the CEO and founder of Awaken Genius. I live in Haringey. I've worked in Haringey for about 14 years in a mainstream school, and it has been very traumatic for me. Just seeing over and over again similar pattern, similar narrative of Black boys and ever increasing Black girls being permanently excluded. I myself faced victimization and racism within the educational system. As a result, I left, but I founded Awaken Genius. Well, it's been a long journey. I've started Awaken Genius since 2014, to be honest, so it's been a long journey. However, as I mentioned, in regards to the message that I sent out to you all, that Awaken Genius is an alternative curriculum, that incorporates the creative arts and collaborative classroom communities into numeracy and literacy. Because I feel that, based on my experience and research, that our young people are screaming something out to us. They're not, of course, perhaps not very articulate in regards to expressing themselves, but they are these certain behaviors are evinced as a result of disruptive behavior. And of course, the major cause of fixed term and permanent exclusion is disruptive behavior. So clearly they're trying to communicate something to us. And I truly strongly believe that what they are trying to communicate to us is, of course, they don't fit into that type of education. Of course, culture plays a massive part, but I think innately we are creative. We are creative beings. Yep. And I'm not negating culture at all, but I do feel at the crux of our being is the fact that we are creators. It is everything around us started off with a thought, so we are creators innately. And if our creativity is being stifled, we're gonna, unfortunately, some will cause distraction, or this if they're not creating, of course, they'll be causing havoc. So I do feel that a lot of our young people, their creativity has been stifled. So they need an alternative curriculum just to awaken their genius, because there's a lot of young people, unfortunately, that have fallen by the wayside, in prisons, youth offending, pupil referral units, etc., etc. And to be honest with you, they are the most talented individuals, mental health institutions, etc. They're so talented, but because they, again, going back to the alternative curriculum, there's nothing creative in the curriculum. As I mentioned, their creativity or their self is being stifled. So to awaken their genius, they certainly need an alternative form of curriculum to awaken the genius that is within, because education, in regards to awaken genius, will take on its original meaning, and that's educere, that's Latin, and that's to bring out what is already within. So we're not giving them nothing. We are facilitating learners to help them, to cultivate them, to nurture them, for them to grow, to become, because there's something in them which their generation needs.
Michael, I fully agree with everything you're saying. Our young people, but they speak in colours. They're very creative. They're very athletic. They're very powerful. And as we said earlier, the curriculum that's designed now is culturally biased, and our children at times feel alienated. So we have to provide those opportunities. And like you're doing now, Michael, if they're not getting it in mainstream schooling and in mainstream education, then we've got to provide it somewhere else so that they have that outlet. So what you're doing, I commend you wholeheartedly. It's fantastic. And we need to be that village. So thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Sure.
Danita, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, thanks. Right, hi everyone. So I'm mindful of time, so we're going to move through this as quicker than I would like to, but we do have a session on the 12th where we will go into mental health and well-being in the greater depth. Minimize this. So what can we do to increase our child's mental health and well-being so that their transition back to school is nice and smooth. Well, first and foremost, we cannot compare ourselves or our child to another person's child, because that's where we start to go wrong, because we experience things in different ways. We're individuals, like one of you's mentioned. Our children are individual. So just because Lisa's daughter's returning to school does not mean that your child needs to be. Lisa she may be happy that her child's going back to school, but that doesn't mean that you are. You may be anxious, and your child may have picked up on that. So to prepare them, we need to start doing small steps, and we need to talk to our children and make sure that they're all right. And your child might be anxious about leaving you, so you need to communicate that with your child and let them know that you're all right when they leave you. Because remember, how many months have they spent with you now on a one-to-one? That's not part of the normal routine. And if your child has any SEM issues, then this is a breaking routine. Episodes can happen. And the only way for us to try and ease this is to make sure that we are talking and communicating with our children. Exactly, when the exams, it's throwing everything out. This is new for everybody, and they are going to become anxious about these sorts of things. Pelego, can I have the next slide, please? So here it is. So for a lot of us, we was always told culturally to just suck it up and move on. You couldn't really talk to your parents, touchy-feely stuff wasn't something that I experienced growing up. So yes, I did have stress and anxiety, and as a parent, I would love it if my child came and spoke to me, but they don't. So we need to go out and we need to find out, well, what do these things look like? We need to be able to identify these in our children, because we can't exactly, children won't come and speak to us. They may, and if they do, then you're very lucky, but they normally talk to their peers. And because they're not at school, who are they talking to? So you need to be observant, you need to monitor them. Has their sleeping patterns changed? Has their behavior changed, positive or negative? Because as was previously mentioned, communication can come out in an aggressive manner. It can come out in violence. We don't know, or them not seeing, not talking, not coming down, not eating, just a sudden change. But it's not always a sudden change. It can be subtle. So we do have to pay attention. Can we change the slide, please? And just remember that if you do notice anything, when they transition back to school, make sure that you talk to the teacher about what you've witnessed, so then they know, so then they don't put your child under any additional pressure, because this is a difficult time for us all. And it's no one could have predicted what's happened. So you do need to be observant, and you do need to make sure that in this week you are communicating with them. We don't make it a big thing. It can just be a little talk. We don't want it to be big. We want to just reassure them and let them know that, you know what, school is a safe place for them, and school is COVID safe. Well, as much as possible, school is COVID safe. Things have been put in place. And if you've got older children and you can see that the communication is not working very well, encourage them to reach out to their friends, because their friends are probably experiencing something similar. There are lots of things that we can do, but as we said, for time-wise, we are going to jump through a lot of this content. But I do know that I think this PowerPoint is going to be sent out to a lot of you anyway. Pelego, can we have the next slide, please? Right, so I like this. This is the emotional cut. Now, back in the day when I was growing up, I would have just got cussed out for this. This is foolishness. And but growing up, I heard a lot of negative comments. My mom didn't give me any positive affirmations, but she would tell her friends about me. Oh, my daughter's this, oh, my daughter's that. But I would only get into things. Why haven't you done this? Oh, you don't do this properly. But this is not the right way. When you do that, you take out of your child's cup. And we want to make sure that our child's cup is full, so that when they transition back to school, they are further able to cope with any of the pressures. It helps. So things that we can do to fill our child's cup, positive affirmations, as I said.
spending quality one-on-one time with them, encouraging them, letting them know that you love them, telling them what you're proud of, rather than just always negative. The only time we communicate with our children sometimes, I'm guilty of it myself, I've had a busy day, and the only time I'm really going to speak is if something's not been done. And these are things that we need to change, because we need our child mentally and emotionally stable so that when they do go back into that class, they're able to deal with the things that they're going to come in contact with. Because what we've got to remember, as well as the racism, the institutional racism, they can be bullying. Children are not nice sometimes. So we need to make sure that mentally our children can deal with these sorts of things. And it's a shame, but this is life. So you've just got to make sure that you try and fill that child's cup. And just because, don't think, oh, it's full, I'm going to stop. Let that cup overflow. Can I have the next slide, please? So these are some questions that we need to ask ourselves. So here's a statement. When you as parents prioritize your child's well-being, they can be confident to communicate their feelings. They're going to be more resilient, because this is what we need in this life. For people, for Black people, we have to be resilient. We have to, because we get attacked on all fronts. So the only way for us to deal with this is through education, through knowledge, and through resilience. We want them to be able to adapt to changes, knowing that they've got our support, knowing that we've got their back no matter what. So this will help them from being disadvantaged. My boys know, even though, yes, sometimes I do have to tell them about themselves, they know that I've got their back. When I go down that school, which, as you've seen, this is what we've been saying, you go to the school, you've got your child's back, you ask them questions. And when my children see me showing up at the school, it's not like when my parents showed up, the white teacher's always right. No, you've got to have your child's back, and that your child needs to feel that security from their parent. Can we have the next slide now? I think we're going to open it up for questions. So over to you, Pelego. And I'm sorry for rushing it, but we will have a session on the 12th where we're going to go into proper detail about mental health and well-being.
Thank you, Danita. Amazing. And as she said, you will have another session on the 12th, which will go further into mental health. But what I want all 30 parents on this Zoom to do now is to take their pen and to write down this question. And it is, what are your plans to minimize the negative impact of lockdown? That's the question that you will pose to your schools. That's the question that you will pose to your schools' senior leaders, because we've looked at the data, we've looked at the challenges that some of our children face, and if we don't get this right, our children will be failed. And that's something that we just can't do. So we've heard everything about the academic transitions and the mental transitions, but the biggest question that we need to ask our senior leaders is, what are your plans? What are you going to do to minimize the negative impact of lockdown? And even if you mention, as Charlotte said earlier, the negative impact of my Black child, you know, we've got the data, we've got the statistics. If we don't get it right, they only have one chance at schooling, one chance in year 3, one chance in year 11, one chance in year 6. Wherever your child is, they have one chance. And if we get it wrong, and the schools get it wrong, then it's harder. It's much harder to get it back. So we want to prevent all that. So please, please, please ask that question straight away. Email your schools straight away. There is a short video. I'm not going to play it just because I'm conscious of time, but I will pop it in the chat, or get Scarlett or get Natalie to send it out. It's really basically about a young man growing up and his mom fighting for him tooth and nail, even when he fell into the wrong crowds, even when he was failing at school. His mom was always, always, always there for him, no matter what. And the message I take away from that video is, every kid needs a hero. You, believe it or not, are your child's hero. And apologies if it sounds as if I'm talking like directly to you and in a condescending way. I do not mean to be. What I am saying is, if you don't fight for your child, who else will? And that's the biggest question. Like, you're that person who needs to fight for your child. I fight for my kids all the time. I haven't got a choice because they get one chance. And the fact that all 30 of you are on this Zoom now tells me that you are all committed to your children. You